Hello, love. You hear that? The rain's back again. It always seems to arrive just when I need it, like it knows. It started a little after 5, soft at first, then steadier. Now it's tapping on the window, calm and rhythmic, like a quiet knock at the door from someone who doesn't need to be let in. Nights like this, I don't mind the quiet. The lamp's on, the teapot's still warm, and I've pulled your grandfather's blanket over my knees, the one he never liked to share. I used to tease him about it. He'd always grumble and give me the smaller end. Then somehow I'd wake up with the whole thing. I suppose some nights ask for soft things. A little light, a little warmth, a little memory. Rain like this brings them up, like bread rising in a warm bowl, slow, unhurried, inevitable. Which is funny, really, because every time the rain comes in like this, I think of bread. Not just bread itself, though I do love the smell. No, I mean the whole ritual of it. The making, the shaping, the waiting. The comfort tucked into something so simple. It always seemed like when the rain came, someone in the house would start reaching for flour. It was like instinct. And I suppose that's what I wanted to tell you about tonight. I must have been 7, 8, maybe, the first time Mom let me help with the bread. We lived in a house with creaky floorboards and cold corners, but the kitchen was always warm when she baked. The walls were yellow, painted by hand with a roller that missed bits in the corners. And the stove was one of those old wood-fired things with a black belly and a door that squeaked when you opened it. But the center of it all was the bowl, a wide, heavy ceramic one, pale brown with a crack running down one side. She said it had been her mother's, and maybe her grandmother's too. It had that look, glazed with age, full of stories it wasn't telling. She'd pour the flour in like snowfall. I remember that, the hush of it, the little clouds that puffed up when she stirred too quickly. And then the yeast, the water, the salt. Nothing fancy, just the way she'd done it forever. When she let me help, I stood on a wooden chair with 2 cushions stacked so I could reach the counter. My hands were too small to do much, but I remember the feel of it. Dough that was alive somehow, soft, warm, elastic, like it breathed with you. She taught me to knead with the heel of my hand, not the fingers, and to turn it with each push, like turning the corner of a bedsheet. There was a rhythm to it, push, fold, turn, like a quiet dance. We didn't talk much while we worked. Mum wasn't the chatty type, but she'd hum sometimes. Little bits of old songs I never knew the names of, and I learned to listen to the dough, to the rain, to the silence. Some silences are soft. This one was. We covered the dough with an old tea towel, white, with faded yellow ducks embroidered along the edge. That was my favorite part, I think, watching the lump of dough sleep beneath it while the rain ticked at the window like a metronome. She used to say the dough could feel the weather, that it rose differently depending on the rain or the wind or the moon. And maybe that was true, or maybe she just knew how to make anything feel like magic. Years later, I baked bread in my own kitchen, Different house, different rain, same flower. I didn't do it as often. Life moved faster and shops were full of bread already made. But on rainy days, when the children were small and school was canceled or the park was too wet, I'd open the cupboard and pull out Mum's old bowl. It still had that crack on the side, still rocked slightly when you stirred, and still caught the flour in the same spots. I remember one afternoon my daughter sat on the floor with a metal spoon and a pot, pretending to help. She'd stir with a look of pure determination, then hit the pot like a drum. Her little brother crawled past with flour on his cheeks, giggling like he'd invented baking. We made a mess, flour in our eyebrows, dough on the dog. The bench looked like a snowstorm had passed through, but I didn't care, because the house felt right. Not clean, not quiet, but full. There's something about the smell of rising dough that makes a house feel safe. I remember watching them as they pressed their fingers into the dough too soon and squealed when it stuck to their hands. I didn't scold them. I wanted them to remember that part, the touch, the texture, the fun. We always ate it before it was ready, sliced it hot, buttered the pieces until they shone, and burned our tongues because none of us could wait. There's a moment after the kneading's done where everything just stops. The dough is covered, the bench is wiped, the bowl is warm, and then nothing, just waiting. I used to love that hour. Sometimes I'd sit at the kitchen table with a book I wouldn't read, just hold it while the house went quiet again. The flour would still be in the air, catching the light, the rain tapping like fingertips on glass. It was a gentle kind of time, not wasted, not busy, just held. Sometimes I'd make a pot of tea and watch it steep. Other times I'd sit with my elbows on the table, chin in my hands, listen to the kettle grumble, the dough rising in the corner and me rising a little too. Even when the kids were small, they seemed to know that was a soft hour. No jumping, no shouting. They'd color at the table or build towers from tea towels. Once, my daughter drew a picture of the bread bowl and called it the Puffing Hill. That made me smile for days. The waiting hour became its own ritual, a little pause, a breath between the steps, and funny enough, those became some of my favorite parts. Not the making, not the eating, just the waiting. I think baking bread taught me about patience more than anything else, about how the good things take time. Warmth makes things rise, and pressure helps them grow. That if you rush the bake, it'll collapse, and sometimes the best loaves are the lopsided ones, the ones that crack open on the side or split in unexpected ways. That's true of people too, I think. I've kept certain spoons longer than I've kept certain friendships. The one with the split handle, the one with a dent in the back, the one that's slightly too short for the big pot, but still feels right in my hand. I have a drawer in the kitchen, the second one down, left of the sink. It sticks a little when it rains, swells just enough to catch. You have to give it a tug. Inside are my spoons, old ones, wooden ones, some with faded handles, some with burn marks or cracks. They rattle softly when I open the drawer, like they're saying hello. There's one with a small chip on the edge. That was my mother's favorite. She said it turned just right in her hand, even when the bowl was heavy. There's a dark one from a market stall, smoothed by years of stirring, and another, newer one that still smells like lemon oil and feels a little too perfect. But I always reach for the same one, the one with the paint worn off the tip of the handle, the one that's been stirred and scraped and knocked against the side of 100 mixing bowls. I think you get attached to the things you use often. They change shape in your hand. They stop being tools and start being part of the rhythm. You don't notice until you try a new one, and it's wrong somehow. Too tall, too sharp, too clean. That drawer is full of stories, of late-night cakes and hurried dinners, of quiet stirring in the dark when the house was asleep, of bread, mostly. When I open it, I can almost hear the cupboard door creak in my childhood kitchen, can almost see Mom's hands reaching past mine to get her spoon. Some things just stay with you, tucked into a drawer where no one looks but you. A few years ago, the girl next door asked if I'd show her how I make my bread. She was about 16 then, always polite but a little shy, the kind who waved from the letterbox but never quite came all the way up the path. One rainy afternoon, she knocked with a notebook in her hand and said, "I've seen you in the kitchen sometimes. Would you mind teaching me?" Well, I can't say no to a question like that. We stood side by side in my kitchen, her with bright eyes, me with my apron on backwards. I showed her how to measure without measuring, how to feel the dough instead of worrying about what it looks like. She kneaded like she was afraid to hurt it. I told her not to be gentle. Dough's like people. It needs a bit of pressure now and then to grow strong. She laughed at that and pressed harder. We let it rise while the kettle boiled and the rain started up. She wrote everything down, every little note, even the silly ones like "Don't forget the salt again," like last Tuesday. When the bread came out of the oven, she held it like it might fall apart. Then she took a bite, smiled, and said, "It tastes warm." I liked that. I told her she could keep the spoon she'd used, one of my newer ones. I still see her sometimes, grown now, walking with her shopping bag and a cardigan over her shoulders, and every so often I smell baking through the hedge, and I wonder if it's her, and if she still remembers how we folded the dough that first time. Some loaves don't rise the same, depending on the sky. I used to think that was nonsense. One of Mum's old sayings like, "The cat knows when you're lying," or "bread hears your mood." But over the years, I started noticing things. On humid days, the dough would puff like a pillow before I'd even turn my back. On cold mornings, I'd tuck it closer to the stove and speak kindly to it. Not out loud, well, not always, but just in the way I touched it. If it was stormy, I'd expect a slower rise. If it was breezy, I'd check the tea towel didn't shift. Bread responds to the world, I think, to your hands, to the weather, to whether or not you're rushing. Once I made 2 loaves side by side, same flour, same water, same spoon, and one came out softer. Couldn't explain it. Still can't. Maybe it was the air, maybe it was me. Baking teaches you not to force things. You can't shout a loaf into rising. You can only give it what it needs: time, space, warmth, and let it do the rest. Some days that's easier than others, but I've learned to listen, to trust what I can't quite explain, and I've made peace with the mystery. Not every loaf is perfect, but every loaf is honest. There was one day I remember clearer than the rest, the kind of storm that makes the windows shudder and the dog hide under the bed. The sky had gone that strange green-gray, heavy as wet wool. Rain didn't fall, it hammered, straight down like someone had tipped the clouds sideways. The power went out sometime around noon. The kettle stopped halfway through its boil. The radio faded mid-song, so I lit the lamp, pushed the curtains wide, and reached for the flower. The kids were restless, stomping in socks, chasing the cat, asking a dozen questions I didn't have answers to. So I gave them tasks. You hold the bowl, you get the spoon, you fold the towel, just like this. I decided to make something new, a braided loaf I'd seen in a book but never tried. It was awkward at first. My fingers didn't know the pattern. The strand slipped and curled the wrong way. I twisted it too tightly, left it too long to rise, and then forgot the milk on top until the very last second. When it came out of the oven, it looked like it had split down one side, laughed too hard in the dark, and cracked open with joy. I almost didn't serve it, almost made toast instead. But the smell, oh, the smell, that soft, yeasty, golden warmth. We ate it by lantern light, cross-legged on the rug, butter melting faster than we could catch it. There was something sacred about that loaf, not because of how it looked, but because of what that moment held. A storm raging outside, warmth filling the cozy kitchen, and our hands full of imperfect bread. They asked me to make it again, of course, but I never got it quite right after that. Some loaves are one-time gifts. You make them once, and they live forever in memory. Have you noticed that the smell of baking moves through a house in its own quiet way? It starts close, right by the oven, wrapping around your sleeves, and then it drifts through the hallway, under doors, into corners that haven't seen sunlight in years. It settles into the curtains, hangs in the air above the rug, lingers on the jumper you wore while you stirred the dough. Even hours after the bread is gone, you can still smell it, soft and warm, like the memory of something still sitting on the bench. Sometimes I catch it unexpectedly, when the windows open just right, or when I pick up an apron that's lived too long in the drawer. It never smells quite the same each time, but it always brings me back. I've got a little collection of aprons. None of them match, none of them new. One's thin and striped with a tear in the pocket from when it caught on the drawer handle. Another's covered in faint orange splotches, not sure if it's pumpkin soup or something else entirely. My favorite's the oldest, a pale blue one with a frayed neck loop and two faded flower handprints across the front. Small ones, from when the kids used to hug me with sticky fingers. I never washed those off. They faded with time, but you can still see the outlines if you look just right. Aprons are funny things. They hold the mess and keep the memories. You wear them for such ordinary moments, stirring, folding, wiping your hands. But over time, they start to carry something quiet, a history of splashes and spills, of burnt edges and perfect rises. I keep them all folded in a basket by the pantry. Every now and then I pull one out and run my hand across the fabric like I'm smoothing the past. And then I tie it on, and it still fits. And then the baking begins again. I always make tea after the bread comes out, even if I don't drink it all, even if I forget about it halfway through. It's just part of the rhythm, the water in the kettle, the clink of the spoon, the curl of steam rising as the crust sings itself cool. There's something about a fresh loaf and a cup of tea that makes the whole world feel tidy, like everything is where it should be, just for a little while. I don't rush it. I sit by the window, watch the rain roll down the glass in silver ribbons. And for a few quiet minutes, there's nothing more to do. Just bread and tea, and the soft feeling that someone might walk into the room at any moment and smile. Did I tell you I have a drawer just for tablecloths? It's always been the one on the bottom left of the sideboard, a little stiff to open. Inside they're folded like old letters, layers of linen and memory. There's the red one I used for birthdays, the green and cream for Christmas, and one pale floral thing that's too thin to protect anything. But I still lay it down when I want the table to feel kind. After baking, I used to set the table with one of those, even if no one else was coming. Even if I was just having bread and butter alone, with a bit of jam and the radio on low. There's something lovely about making the place feel ready. A tablecloth smooths more than just wood. It softens the day. And when you sit down at a table that's been made for you, even by your own hands, you feel like you're being welcomed, even if it's just by yourself. We always had a butter dish on the table, one of those little glass ones with a ridged lid and a pat inside, softening under the heat of the bread. Sometimes it melted before it even touched the slice, vanished into gold. I had a wooden butter knife I liked best, still do. It's stained now, but it spreads better than any shiny one ever did. I made jams too, apricot mostly, and strawberry if they were on special. Had rows of jars lined up on the back bench, labeled in my crooked handwriting. Apricot, February 2009. Fig, not great. Well, it was a bit of an experiment. Someone down the road had a fig tree that year, overripe ones falling like stones onto the pavement, and she brought me a basket full like it was gold. I didn't want to waste them, so I made a batch. Too much sugar, not enough lemon. Turned out more like fruit glue than jam, if I'm honest. We still ate it, of course, on toast, in crumbles, stirred into porridge. But every time I opened that jar, it just smelled confused, so I labeled it like I meant it. Fig, not great. Still have one jar left. Can't quite bring myself to throw it away. Mum's lemon butter, that was another story. Sharp enough to make your eyebrows rise, but oh, it went beautifully on fresh bread. Bright, sunny, and just on the edge of too bold. She said you only need a little of something strong to make a thing memorable. I've never been able to make it quite like she did, but I keep trying. I still have a few of those jars tucked away. Even if I don't eat them fast enough now, Sometimes it's just nice to see them there, catching the light. Little shelves of memory, some full, some half gone, some sealed so long I forget what's inside. And on certain days, the right kind of days, I feel them calling to me, kind of like those days that call for baking. You know the ones when the house feels too quiet, or the wind makes the windows twitch, or you wake up and can't quite tell what you need. Not sadness, not restlessness, just that gentle feeling that something warm should be happening. Those are the days the flower comes out, not because I'm hungry, not because I've planned it, just because my hands want to remember something. It's not a scheduled thing, never has been. It's more like a tug, soft, invisible, pulling from the cupboard, from the past, from the part of me that knows the rhythm of a good loaf better than a clock. Like the house is hungry for warmth, like the windows want steam, like my hands are meant to do something soft. Sometimes it's the light, the way it pours in all gold and slanted. Sometimes it's the sound, the rain or the wind or a silence that needs stirring. Sometimes it's just knowing the week needs a middle, a little weight, a little structure, a smell that says, today happened. I used to think I was silly for listening to that, but now I think it's wisdom, a kind of knowing that doesn't use words, a kind of remembering that starts in the fingertips. Some things we don't need to explain. We just know when it's a bread day, and we follow the feeling. When the bread's been made and the feeling has passed, I always seem to leave the last slice a little longer than the others. Not on purpose, really. It just happens that way. The heel of the loaf, or the soft middle piece with the crinkle in the crust, the bit no one reaches for first. I tuck it under a tea towel and let it sit. Sometimes I have it with butter late in the evening. Sometimes I save it for the neighbor's boy who comes by after school and swears I make the best bread in the world, though I'm sure his mom does too. Once I used the last slice for breadcrumbs, just so it wouldn't go to waste. Felt a little sad watching it turn into dust, but it still meant something. It still finished the job. Funny how even the smallest bit can feel like the last chapter of something good. When the baking's finished, I wash up by hand, always have. Even when we had a dishwasher, I never used it for the mixing bowls or the wooden spoons. They felt too personal somehow, too lived in to be scrubbed by a machine. I like the feel of warm water, the way bubbles gather around the edges of the sink, the soft clink of the butter dish as I set it down to dry. There's something calming about it, putting things back in their place. The slow rinse, the careful stacking on the tea towel, the cloth draped over the bowl, just so. By the time the last plate is clean, the house feels quiet again, still carrying the smell of bread and a little steam on the windows. Everything tucked away, nothing urgent, just the gentle hum of a kitchen that's done what it needed to do. I don't bake every week now, but I still do. Not the big showy loaves, Not the fancy plats or sourdoughs that take 3 days and a prayer. Just simple bread, the kind that makes the kitchen smell like home. I still use Mum's bowl, still has that chip on the side, and I still have the tea towel with the ducks, though one of them's nearly worn away. I don't knead as long, and I sit on a stool while I mix, but I do it when the weather calls for it, when the clouds roll in just so and the windows mist up and the house asks for something warm. There's comfort in it, even now. Sometimes I make a single round loaf and eat it across 3 days. Sometimes I bake for the neighbors and leave it wrapped with a note. And sometimes I just let the smell fill the house and I don't need a reason at all. So that's what I think of love when the rain comes. That's what I reach for: flour, warm water, and a little time. That's all it takes, really, to make something from nothing, to feel like you've done something soft for the world, even if no one sees it. Thanks for sitting with me tonight. You go ahead and rest now, honey. I've still got a bit of dough left to shape. Maybe I'll make a pot of tea, too. Don't worry, I'll be right here, just pottering about while you sleep. The rain's still falling, slow and steady, and everything's just as it should be.